I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief of pharmaphorum. I'm here at ASCO 2026 with Harold Keer, the Chief Medical Officer at Taiho Oncology. We're going to talk a little bit about the news that Taiho is bringing to the show and about what we've seen and heard so far at ASCO. Thanks for joining me, Harold.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jonah.
Tell me a little bit about the news that you're bringing to the show today, some of the recent accomplishments at Taiho.
Actually, a lot of the accomplishments are outside of ASCO, but have been, a building news cycle. They relate to approved products as well as our late-stage development pipeline. You've probably seen recently INCOVI, our ASTX727,
Right.
recently received an approval in combination with venetoclax for AML, newly diagnosed AML unfit for chemotherapy. As well as earlier in the year, we had FDA accepted our NDA for a drug called zipalertinib. It was an EGFR inhibitor that we believe is sort of next generation, improves upon some of them that are there, and specifically for the exon 20 mutation insertion population. We have ongoing trials with futibatinib. It's an FGFR inhibitor, and a next generation or version of azacitidine, ASTX030. So these are all activities, and it's really, I look at ASCO and EHA since we're doing both solid tumors as well as hematologic malignancies.
So tell me, what's the kind of overriding philosophy or mission statement at Taiho Oncology that pulls together all the things in your portfolio?
Well, I'd like to say it's completely unique, but it really, it's very much about patients. I think when you follow the science, collaborate. So all those elements come together. And so what that means is that we've got multiple agents which are oral. That includes Lonsurf, which has been approved for multiple years, futibatinib for cholangiocarcinoma, INCOVI for both MDS and AML now. Zipalertinib is also oral. However, if you look in sort of the new generation compounds, we recently, it's been over a year at this point, acquired a company called Araris. I should point out that was acquired by our parent company, TPC. That gives us access to really novel antibody drug conjugates, ADCs. And any cancer conference you go to, you can't help but hear about these new agents. We believe that ours has the potential to really be best, and I'm sure everybody says that, but again, it comes back to let's treat patients, let's make sure that things are better for patients, for their caregivers, and use multiple modalities to do that.
Talk to me about the recent approval of INCOVI and AML. What's the existing kind of treatment options for that population, and how does this approval change things?
So AML, is a disease of the blood cells, really abnormal proliferation, and results in bone marrow dysfunction. So you get complications of infection, anemia, bleeding, and so on. If not treated, it can be rapidly fatal. And we basically think about it as two different categories: those that are able to get curative treatment, intensive chemotherapy, induction of remission, so you get rid of all the bad cells, and then come back with usually a transplant. And that can be curative. For younger patients, and the definition of that seems to change, but it is typically 65, perhaps even 70, where patients can receive an allogeneic transplant. That's very involved. The majority of patients, due to the epidemiology of the disease, tend to be older, tend to have multiple medical issues, or not be able to get intensive therapy. For the longest time, those patients were treated with monotherapy hypomethylating agents, either azacitidine, decitabine, and so on. In the last 10 years, the addition of a drug called venetoclax, it's a BCL2 inhibitor, which is given orally, in combination, markedly improved response rates. And just for a comparison, as opposed to being sort of in the 15 to 20%, more than doubled them up to sort of the 35 to 40%. But it involves parenteral therapy. Azacitidine is given as a high volume injection 7 days every month. And so, you can imagine that if patients if they do really well, and some patients will respond well to this therapy and be on therapy for multiple years. Well, they have to go back 7 days every month. They're getting shots. Eventually, their skin, they get tired of getting poked. If they're getting decitabine, it's IV. Venous access becomes a problem after a while. Maybe they get ports and complications. So Inqovi is oral. It allows decitabine with a combination of an inhibitor of cytidine-deaminase, preventing the destruction of it in the gut or the liver. It allows oral availability. And essentially, in the early trials, we demonstrated you could get exactly the same overall exposure as you would if you gave it parenterally with a pill. Well, and there were no apparent marked increase in GI side effects or anything like that. So that was this monotherapy. That was in MDS. And this most recent drug is in combination with venetoclax, so oral combination. So you can imagine initially patients need to be watched very closely, but for those patients who are doing well, maybe they can get in and see the doctor, at the beginning of the month, how are they doing, get a pill, but they're getting pills. And so, the remarkable thing from a patient perspective, and again, it ties back to, you asked about our mission, it ties back to, we have patients who've been on therapy for multiple years. Occasionally they want to take a vacation, or they want to take their medicine and they're on a cruise with their family or something like that. I mean, these are patients who are frequently 75 or older. They may be 80. One of my favorite stories is we got a request for a patient on trial. Well, can she skip or can she delay her treatment a week because she wants to go spend time with her family to celebrate her 90th birthday? I mean, these are the things that really, really kind of, hit home, and that's really kind of why we do what we do. So this is the first all oral therapy for newly diagnosed AML, and so we're very proud of that.
Yeah, well, thank you for going into that, because I think it's really important to remember that extending life is only one goal, and the quality of life is also really important.
That's something I believe that we work very closely with the various patient advocacy groups, so it does allow us to get the patient's voice as well. We're not unique, but we do take that very seriously, and it's something that makes me proud to kind of work at Taiho and lead the R&D efforts over at Taiho.
So we're only about half a day into the ASCO conference. Anything you've seen or heard so far that's interesting, or anything you're looking forward to?
I was actually just at I talk about zipalertinib. It's a drug that is expected to have activity and has demonstrated activity in lung cancer, at least as a monotherapy. I think I mentioned that it's currently, there's an NDA under review at FDA. So there's some competitor data, and asking questions about compared to chemotherapy in this hard to treat population, can a pill do better? The results were positive. It's interesting. And that's something that we've been watching very, very closely. Our trial design is actually different. So we actually are combined with chemotherapy. And we'll see. I think that there's several common theme to with the all oral therapy. This is something where you may be able to take chemotherapy and replace it with a pill. And again, we do need to look at quality of life. We need to make sure that it's not just given differently, but that it's reasonably tolerated, and most importantly, maintains the efficacy that you get with parenteral therapy.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, Dr. Keer. Really, really interesting stuff.